Welcome. Never knowingly diplomatic. We're just a bunch of twats. Charming and charismatic. Fuck that shit with the aristocrats. Accidental, inconsequential, autocrat. Yeah, that's right, with the aristocrats, bitch.
That's right. You have made it. You have made it to the Aristocrats podcast, episode 4, where we're talking about both sex and sexuality. I have my co-host Alex Botten. He's going to be back in a second. He's working the technical end of things. And we also have our regular panelists. We have Mark, as well as Fiona. Is that you, Alex?
I am here, yes.
Excellent. And we also have, as a guest for this episode, Xxxild, YouTube sensation. And we also have Kat, of course, with Alex. How dare I? And so Xxxild, the YouTube sensation, is a sex workers' rights advocate. So it's only appropriate that we have somebody with that kind of, cred to, pretty much talk to us about things and stuff having to do with sex and sexuality. So, welcome, Xxxild. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for having me on. I'm a little nervous because I thought I was going to be on with a bunch of other people, but now I'm all self-centered and full of myself. Yeah.
It's all going to be fine. That's my prediction. So, Alex, I'm going to hand it over to you so that you can assist in the format and the itinerary of what's going down. Or I'm going to more appropriately hand it off to Kat, because I think that this was initiated by her.
Indeed. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Yes, sweet. I then have to do what I've just done in reverse in a few minutes when we get to actually playing in the video news for this week. But one day that'll be easier as well. And I'm not going to do my usual rant against Google
Yes, you are.
that I normally do. I do it every week. Yeah, I do it every week. But yeah, so welcome to the show. We have made it to episode 4.
If only barely.
Yeah, sorry we're late. We have been struggling with the vagaries of getting people actually into the Hangout because we are meant to have Reignbow with us as well. Not the TV show from the 70s and 80s that was on on ITV, I believe, with Bungle, Zippy, George, and there was another one. Bungle, Jeffrey, there we go, and Rod, Jane and Freddie were also on it. They were the singing sensations that were on it. Yeah, we were supposed to have Reignbow on. We are trying to get Reignbow on in the background. Who knows? It may work at some point in the future. If you've used Hangouts, you know how randomly annoying they can be. So, yes, but hopefully we will get her on. But so anyway, yeah. So the topic of today's show, I'm rambling. I'm very aware of that. I'm also frantically flicking through different screens on my computer. The topic of the show is sex and sexuality. This was a suggestion of my lovely wife, Kat.
Yes.
We are going to see where it takes us. Exciting places, interesting places, challenging places, maybe sexy places. I don't know if there's going to be sexy places, but
You're so strange.
yeah, sorry. But yeah, so we'll do as we do with every week, every fortnight, I should say. Fortnight, for those who don't know what a fortnight is, that's 2 weeks, because I found out that some people don't actually recognise that phrase. It's a weird kind of maybe a weird British thing.
Yeah.
Kat's agreeing. Yeah. So
I'd never really heard fortnight until I moved here.
yeah. So I don't know why we call it a fortnight.
That's not important.
Let's not go into that for half an hour. Okay, so yeah, so as we always do, we'll do a little bit about what's been going on in the world. We'll have the video news, which returns this week. What's been going on YouTube news, that'll be good. And then we will go to the show proper, the topic proper, where we'll open up the discussion. Then once the discussion is over, in about 90 minutes or so, once the show's brought to close, we will draw our friend Cliff Jumper in. He will tell us about the after show, and then we will allow people to join in and chat into the night. So it'll be very exciting. So And Mark, well, first thing I'm going to say, Mark has a new microphone.
Yep. Cat insisted I arrive tonight.
Yep.
He had to come for the sex.
Well, maybe later, Cat.
Now, if you're getting lag, anybody, try turning your settings down a little bit just for now. Actually, what I might do is do that here as well because I've got my settings turned up. I'll drop that down to lower. Everything will go pixely, but it makes me look more attractive anyway. So you went and bought a new microphone, Mark?
Yep, this morning, yes. Cat insisted, so...
I
And
did.
thanks to you, I got it on... You found it on Amazon for me, and then I found it in Maplin, so...
You have joined the land of the people who own blue microphones.
Yes.
That are actually silver.
The wife is very impressed with it. I tried
Is she?
serenading her with it. Oh no, she's shaking her head now.
Did you just hold it like that and cup it in your hand and sing to
Yeah.
it?
Are you lonesome tonight? Oh, she's opening her eyes. Yeah, yeah.
It sounds so good now, compared to the kind of weird crackling sound that was coming out for the last few weeks. It's a big improvement.
I just thought that's how he sounded.
Yeah. So the news this week then. Russia seems to be hell-bent on starting World War III. What do people think about that?
Yeah, he's quite sane, isn't he?
Yeah.
Technically, we already had World War III. It was with Russia.
Yeah. Other people can unmute themselves, by the way. I'm kind of aware that three of the panel are sitting there with their mics muted. You can talk, people. and you, Fiona, you can unmute. Yeah.
I have to admit my complete naivete about this situation. I have not watched much news. Like I said, recently I was at conference and semi-vacation, so what the hell is going on?
Well, remember in the kind of 80s where you'd play computer games that were based around the idea of Russia starting World War III, and they would often start up with a large build-up of Russian forces on the border of Ukraine. That's happening. So like those kind of Spectrum and Commodore war games from the 80s. It's like Putin has played one of these and decided that that's what he's now going to do.
Playing it as a game format wasn't fun enough. He wanted to include humans. He wanted the scale to equal 1 mile equals 1 mile.
Yeah.
It's a massive multiplayer, non-online RPG.
And the thing is, because we kind of seem to have got past this whole idea of using nuclear weapons, because I think everybody's decided they're a terrible idea. It does look like it will be a traditional land war. So it's even more like the old school computer games. Actually, it's a little bit like Call of Duty.
What is it? It's like Risk.
It's a bit like Risk Cross. He's been playing Call of Duty, and he's decided that he wants to have a go at it in real life. He's gone, I really like the idea. I can't do the Russian accent. So I'm going to imagine he talks like a Cockney.
Just say what you want to say in your New York accent and pretend that is your Russian accent.
Imagine my Cockney accent. Imagine this is his accent. He's gone, all right there, Yuri. Let's go and kick some arse in Europe. Yeah.
That's how he looks, though, isn't it?
Let's go and expand ourselves. Yeah, that will make us popular. That's how he talks.
What has Obama done? Has he made a formal statement yet? I plead ignorance.
Obama has said that he will not. He's basically said that there won't be a military kind of reprisal to it. He's not going to commit the military to it. Which is lucky because I think most of the U.S. Army's in Iraq and Afghanistan, isn't it?
Most of the army's in boxes.
Oof.
Whoa.
Is that a comment about them being robots? No.
No.
No. Okay. We'll move swiftly on from that comment. So that's the situation with that. Has anybody else got any news they want to tell us about that's piqued their interest this week?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
God, you're boring fucks.
I'll pull in something else then.
Oh wait! Here's something that was interesting. The new Game of Thrones was on Sunday.
I watched it. Now, there's going to be some people watching this that haven't seen it.
Yeah, so I can't give anything
No
away.
spoilers. I saved them all up and watched them at one time at the end of the season.
That's the way
So I'm
to do it.
saving them all. I'm going to watch them in one go when the whole show's finished.
Yep.
No, you're not.
The
In
best
10
way.
years, I'm going to sit down. I couldn't bear that. I'm not a fan. Kat and I do have discussions about this because I'm not a big fan of Game of Thrones.
It's because he doesn't pay attention.
I do pay attention. I just find
No,
it
you
tremendously
don't.
boring.
You
Yeah.
made a point of not paying attention and barely watching, so you don't know who the fuck anybody is because you don't pay attention. It has nothing to do with the beards and the hair.
It doesn't. But look, it doesn't help that the characters are split into. How would you describe it? Kind of sexy scheming ladies, innocent scheming ladies, men with curly hair and beards, men with straight hair and beards, and old men with beards. And a
Stannis
couple of
doesn't
children.
have a beard.
Who hasn't got a beard?
Everyone with the beards, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's like when you're trying to tell some of the characters apart, they are literally indistinguishable.
No, they are not.
They are short hair, short curly hair, bit of a beard, English accent. Who is it? Who is it?
There
It's
is-
called
Theon.
Gobble
There is
Job.
a nice
That's
amount
Theon.
of both violence and sex in the episodes.
Yeah,
Sex.
Sometimes together.
that's true.
Sex.
But the other thing I find though about it is that from my point of view, I think nothing has happened for 3 series.
That's not true.
It feels like just people are just wandering around from miserable castle to miserable castle.
Wow, you're not biasing your perception at all. Castles are miserable. The castles are miserable.
Yeah, Cat is stabbing me with a stylus.
I'm with
Okay.
Alex. I was told that it was a great series and there's lots of sex in it, and I watched 10 minutes and I was bored shitless, so I switched it off. I just
You like
couldn't
there's
see
not been
anything
any
about it.
sex in this episode so far.
It's just so boring. But my friends in Northern Ireland, 'cause it's filmed there, so some of them are extras in the new series.
Yeah.
Oh.
And we've been to the forest where it's all filmed and all that, and I was bored shitless. It was so boring.
Well, it might pick up, and Kat has told me that it is really good, and I can understand some people like it, so I'm not going to diss it too much. But personally, my opinion is that I don't like it very much, but I understand that other people do. There is another story actually linked to the whole Ukraine thing, and that is that there was a rumor going around that the Ukraine, in the kind of Russian-held part, was starting to request that Jews register, and if they didn't kind of turn up to register their kind of presence, they would have property taken away and citizenship taken away. So there was a big fuss about this, and a lot of people kind of went, ooh, shades of Nazism. It turns out that it wasn't actually coming from anybody in officialdom, and it was some people trying to cause trouble and trying to kind of whip up fear and anxiety to try and maybe turn some of the population against the Russians who've come in. So there you go. If you haven't heard that before, people, you've heard it here.
That sounds really upsetting. That's sounds like the beginnings of like some kind of statement against Israel or something. What's that? What is that about?
Well, it's basically what it is that effectively the people who don't want Russia to come in and take over the Ukraine are trying to turn the people in that part of the Ukraine against the Russian invaders, for want of a better way of putting it. So they've sent out these letters saying this with the official kind of heading on it and claiming to have been written by the guy who's the kind of the head of the occupying forces, and it turns out that he's not had anything to do with it, and the guys that have done it are kind of all operating on their own and are basically trying to stir up a kind of rebellion, but using kind of really underhand tactics and really kind of an emotive thing to do.
Yeah.
Which is,
Oh, doesn't that remind you of other people?
yeah, who'd have thought that would happen? People are shit, aren't they?
Tactics. That's unusual. Yep.
So that's been that. I'm trying to think before we go to the video news. What else has happened?
Nothing.
The cat's like going, get on with it. Get on with it, cat. Okay.
The sun came out.
The sun did come out, yes. So
Yes.
somebody needs to talk for a few moments while I now set my audio up again. So it would help. Go, Chris. You can do it.
Well, wait, what were you just referring to?
What was I just referring to?
The sun came out? What?
Yeah, we've
Look
had
at
the
that
sun.
big yellow ball in the sky.
Sun.
Oh, Jesus, God. I thought that... I don't know what the hell you were referencing. I was like, what the hell is everyone talking about right now?
Big yellow ball.
Anyway, so I think we're getting ready for the YouTube news. And that's going to be a fantastic hit because there's a high demand for it since Alex was not able to prepare one 2 weeks ago. So it has been 4 weeks since people have been able to whet their whistle on the entertaining narrative and editing skills of one said Alex Botten. Now, I'm just going to keep going, dude, until you stop.
Hurry up, Alex, hurry up.
What I was going to say is, I mean, hopefully you can hear me at the moment. I'm going to play a little bit of the title sequence back in to see if it can still be heard. So hold on. Just tell me if you can hear this. No. I can tell nobody could hear that. Right. Okay, hold on. I need to change something in my system preferences.
Different podcast, same professionalism.
Used for this.
So let's make guesses as to what's going to be in Alex's YouTube news. Over the past 2 weeks, lots of things have happened. Some things we won't talk about, some things we will talk about. But who wants to take bets that it is about hairless midgets?
There
Now-
might be some of that. Yeah.
Now, in the sense that,
I thought we were done talking about Game of Thrones.
well, I mean, you know, when I have to fill time, I pull out the big gun. So, all right, while Alex is working on that, I actually have a joke. So, a guy and a girl meet in a bar, and there's a little connection and chemistry. So, he buys her a drink, and you know, and eventually she goes, "I need to tell you, hon, I'm really into some kinky shit. So, I hope you're cool with that." And he's like, "No problem whatsoever. Let me buy another drink." They pound another drink. Chemistry's getting a little more palpable. And she goes, "No, I don't think you understand. Like, I'm really into some kinky, wacky shit." And he goes, "Hun, you're preaching to the choir. Let's kick these back and go to your crib." She's like, "No problem." So they go back to her place. She goes, "Let me slip into something more comfortable." Goes into the bedroom and puts on a complete like latex outfit with a leather mask with the zipper, cat o' nine tails in one hand, butt plug in the other. She walks out of the bedroom getting ready to have her way with the man, and he's ready to walk out the door. She goes, "I thought I told you I was into something kinky." He goes, "Babe, I already fucked your dog and shit in your purse. I'm done." You're welcome.
It looks like we have got Rainbow. Hello, Rainbow.
Yeah.
Rainbow has arrived.
Rainbow!
Tell me if you can hear this.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, that's
Oh,
what
yeah,
I
yeah, you got that.
So, yeah.
You're so useless.
You can do all the tech side next time. If you're any
You're
better.
as useless as
Jazzy
Jason
intro.
Burns' nipples.
You see, Kat, if this was the new Covenant crew, I would have 50 guys sitting behind us, going, just leaning into the mic and going, "Okay, Alex, just going live in 4 seconds. Going to count you down. 4, 3, 2, 1, you'll go." And I don't have that. I have to do it all myself, like like Inspector Gadget or something.
Actually, the new Covenant group only counts from 5 to 3, and you have to imagine 2-1
Oh my
and
God.
hit your point.
That's really pro. Wow.
That's not what I wanted to do. So I've got the video news. So this is the video news. Again, everybody, please mute yourselves. I'm going to steal focus here, and it's going to be very exciting. So that includes you, Rainbow. You must. Thank you. Thank you. You see, I have to make sure everybody toes the line here. So yes, this is what's been happening in the wonderful, wacky world of YouTube. I'm going to turn up my bandwidth. This will, if any of this drops out, it will be uploaded as well as a separate file. But yeah, okay. And then we're getting on. I can see Kat's looking really annoyed at me over the corner of my shoulder. She's giving me an evil look. Oh my God. Okay, so here's the YouTube news for this week. I'm going to screen share. This is it. Enjoy. And now we'll look at some of the things that have been happening in the last 2 weeks online. Things like this. Manchester and sales via Bleach go through the roof as Christian apologist brings sexy back.
Here's a little song I wrote. You might want to sing it note for note. Don't worry. Be happy.
Gay News in Canal Street in Manchester unveils new anthem. In Hollywood, there's a surprise announcement as Jonathan Demme reveals the first footage from the remake of The Silence of the Lambs, his 1991 classic starring Jodie Foster. And who's playing Buffalo Bill? Why, it's a certain British apologist, and here he comes. Music news, Canadian musician Venetian Snares unleashes his new video on the world.
Hi folks, this is Jay. How are you doing?
Holy hell! What was that?
I'm never going to get that image out of my head.
I don't know what just happened. My mind is blown. I don't even know what to say.
I'm even more confused here. It was all just sounds for me because my bandwidth is right off.
You're
That's
lucky.
fine. Yeah.
You're lucky, Rainbow.
You are so lucky. It just have been sounds. Right, I'm going to make everything work again properly, so give me a moment.
Okay. So apparently, since that was YouTube news, within the past 2 weeks, Jason Burns has been dancing shirtless and broadcasting it. Am I saying anything incorrect? Somebody correct me, please.
No,
No.
that's all right. That's correct.
It's scary.
And the best part is, you didn't reuse one short clip like it only happened for a little bit. You had enough material that you could edit different bits.
I could have made that section about twice as long and it would have never repeated. So anyway, I think that, as I said right at the start, sales of eye bleach have gone through the roof because of that. So today's topic, I'm gonna hand over to my lovely wife at this point because she's going to explain what the topic was. Do you want to swap seats?
Sure, baby.
Okay, sweetie. This is going to be exciting because we're attached to the computer with headphones.
Do you like my leather skirt?
I do like your leather skirt,
Ooh.
yeah. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Mrs. Weird sitting in this seat. Oh, God. Eagle-eyed viewers will notice that not only do I have an Eric Strip poster behind me today, I'm wearing one of their T-shirts.
Ah.
Because he's a sad, sad man.
Could you pass me my coat, please, my dear?
I need Coke to get through this. Sorry. Okay, so we are discussing sex today, in its many guises. Some of the things that I wanted to discuss in general are things like slut shaming, both male and female, and the legalities of sex work, and sort of the opinions that we have on all the recent sort of kerfluffle that's been going on about sex work, and how the fact that in the U.S., barring sort of Nevada, sex work is absolutely illegal, whereas actually it is not illegal in the U.K. And just generally to bring religion back into everything like we do, I'd also like us to have a little chat about how religion deals with sexuality, both homosexuality, pansexuality, all of that, as well as sort of the effects of oppressing yourself, especially through sort of biblical, don't masturbate, don't do this, don't do that, you're gonna die, that sort of shit. But we've dragged poor Rainbow and Xxxild in to have a little chat about that, and the guys are just along for the ride because they heard the word sex.
It's funny because it's true.
Yeah, well.
That is the case. So, I guess it's kind of people's opinions on things.
Well, let's start with sort of the big one, which is really my particular interest is the area of sex work, and my understanding is that Xxxild obviously has some relevant information about the whole sort of topic, but I've always found it interesting that sex work is something that's illegal, because as my friend Carl's friend pointed out yesterday, especially if you talk about feminism, which you can get into the feminazi side of it as well, but it seems odd to say that you can have control over your body, about who you sleep with, the ability to have an abortion, things like that, but it stops at your ability to make money from your own body. So,
right. And I would put that under the heading of under what terms you're willing to have sexual exchanges with, sexual encounters with anyone of any nature. And some of these encounters aren't. There's actually very little sex involved, right? So if you're hiring a professional dominatrix,
there's almost never any sex when you're speaking about.
Right.
It's very odd for a dom to actually ever sleep with her clients. So.
Right.
Not that I know or anything.
It's not typically what they want you to believe. What our opponents want you to believe. They want to you to have a picture in your head of a woman lying there being traumatized by her, by the man, essentially.
Yeah.
And most people go there. That's where they go in their heads. And anytime you see any news media about this, it's always the women who are being dragged into the police station and rescued, or demonized, or the women's faces, or the typically trans women's faces are on mugshots, and everybody wants you to see these ugly, sordid things, and not have to think about the fact that you may be seeing a mugshot, but what happened was that this person was engaging in sex with another consenting adult in the vast majority of cases. Yeah.
I think we should remember, too, that there is an ugly side to sex work. There is lots of poverty, and some people can be coerced into work that they don't necessarily want to do, maybe to support an addiction, or even sometimes their family, and they don't want to do it. And that's not... I think that if prostitution was decriminalized and regulated, it might keep some of the people who are coerced into it out of the business.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have a perspective on that as well. I left home at 16, and I ended up staying at a shelter called Children of the Night, which basically is a shelter that exists for children who have been either sexually abused or have been brought into prostitution, usually because they're runaways, or like their mother's boyfriend turns out to actually be, a pimp, and sort of that side of prostitution where there is coercion, but when it comes down to it, when we're talking about the consenting adult side of it, as far as I'm concerned, and I mean, obviously, I'll just put it straight out, I'm in support of sex workers, I'm in support of sex work in general, and the fact is, there are a lot of people who get really uptight about the concept of prostitution, but are perfectly happy to look at pornography, and that's prostitution as well. It's people having sex for money. The only difference is you're not on camera, and you may actually know who, you get a little bit of say in who your Johns are, whereas you can walk into a porn set and have no idea who you're banging that day, all 37 of them, and you're not a prostitute, you're a porn star.
Right, especially as more of the porn that's being produced involves people who are actually not acting, they're doing it, they're filming themselves, or they're going on Cam 4, I think it's called Cam 4, or making material where people are actually enjoying what they're doing. Some of the older porn, it's typically actors and actresses, so it's it's considered entertainment, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that it's really silly that you can do sex work as long as it's being filmed, it's legal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing that's been baffling me for years about this, and I came into this debate pretty much unaware that it would even be going on, But what's baffling is that it's so hard to get people to push through their own, the biases and the stereotypes they have about sex workers, to the point where even if there's one time recently, some sex workers made a video, piece where they were all talking about how they came out to their parents, declaring that they were sex workers. This is part of what they do to survive, and they like it. They're okay with it. They all have different little stories, and that's all this video was. It caused a huge uproar. People wanted to revert immediately back to the stereotype that they're all diseased and problem, and didn't enjoy it. Even though the sex workers themselves were speaking on the video with their own words, and their own faces, telling them that they are fine with it and they just want to be accepted, that sort of thing.
Well, I think there are two main camps that people who don't really want to think about sex workers in a positive way fall into, which is they either believe that it's exploitation of women and children and whomever, or they're sluts. They're dirty whores who just, want to fucking, what was it, revel in their feckless sin?
Revel in their feculent sin, yes. I think a lot of it comes down to the kind of the way that religion's treated sex over the centuries has made it something to be ashamed of and to be controlled.
But it's one of those weird things that, obviously people acknowledge the fact that in the biblical story, in the work of, the narrative, Mary Magdalene is meant to be a prostitute. And
there's lots of very unusual couplings happen in the Bible.
Yeah.
With, is it Lot and his drunken, a drunk Lot and his two
Isaac?
daughters?
No, I thought it was I don't remember, but his daughters took advantage of him while he was drunk?
Yeah, it's Lot after escaping from Sodom and Gomorrah.
After his wife gets turned into a pill or salt for looking.
Yeah, she looks back at the explosion.
Lot's daughters believe that they're the last people left in the world. And how are we going to keep everything going? The only man around's dad, so let's get him pissed.
Yeah, so they're getting drunk. Because we all know that drink and erections go together. All men know that.
Kid me dick.
That's Mark there. Laugh of recognition from Mark. A look of kind of like, yes, it gives me a rager from Chris. The story itself makes no sense, but there's these things happen in the Bible. There's these very, very odd things, but those are kind of glossed over a little bit, and more the kind of concentration is on, it is sinful. You must not do this before you are married, and you must never get divorced. And I think it seems to me it's very controlling. Well, obviously, unless you're the rapist, in which case you can get off the crime by marrying the rapee and paying some money.
And never ever divorcing her.
Yeah.
But no, back to sort of on the subject of sex work. One of the things recently that I found out that I think is quite interesting is the idea that in Britain you are able to engage in escort work, so prostitution, without it being illegal. The only real rules are you can't advertise someplace where, like in public spaces.
Right.
So you get a lot of advertising online, and one of the more sort of odd laws that apply is you can participate in sex work as long as there aren't more than one sex worker on the premises. Because the second there's more than one sex worker on the premises, it's a brothel and it's illegal, which often puts girls in danger because obviously there's a certain amount of safety in working in pairs, or at least being in the same, flat or hotel room or whatever, so that if something happens, you have someone to help you out.
Right.
So I've always found that to be kind of an odd idea that brothels, I think honestly that sex work should be legalized, regulated, and that brothels are actually a really good idea, because you have groups of women who have a backup for each other. You can screen the Johns to a certain extent, and if there's one of him and 10 of you in the building, if he seems like an arsehole, you can get him out, and call the police without you being the ones in trouble. So,
absolutely.
I'm sorry about the cat.
Because one of the features of any casual encounter you might have sexually with someone is there's a bit of a risk there. Okay, there's a health risk, as usual, with anybody who's having a lot of sex and multiple partners, right? But with sex workers, because of the stigma, I keep repeating the stigma, there's the element of danger, and that cannot be denied. Okay, and lack of prosecution and everything that comes with that. In other words, when sex workers are murdered, we tend to see that they're not their deaths are not investigated thoroughly. They're written off, denigrated by the police informally, and that sort of thing.
Well, it's actually kind of interesting you mentioned that, because there was a bunch of murders of women who worked as prostitutes about 5 or 6 years ago, and the press. Sorry, there's a cat trying to bash a window seal there. The press kind of, after a few weeks, stopped referring to them as prostitutes and started referring to them as women who worked as sex workers or women who worked as prostitutes. Now, the writer, what's his called? Something Littlejohn. Do you remember, Mark, what his name is?
Richard Littlejohn.
Richard Littlejohn.
Yep.
Yeah, Richard Littlejohn wrote an article complaining that the press had started to write that they were women who worked as prostitutes.
Rather than just prostitutes or whores.
And the comedian Stuart Lee kind of really went to town on him, saying that, what was this guy going to do? Was he going to break into the graveyards at night and get out a chisel and, like, under their names, chisel into the gravestones, so-and-so's name, and then he'd chisel in prostitute, not a woman who works as a prostitute. And he was going to chisel that onto all of them. Stuart Lee then goes on to say that he was going to creep into Richard Littlejohn's graveyard and chisel cunt, not a man who works as a cunt, underneath his name on it. But yeah, it's this whole idea that they were being humanised, and some of the right-wing press kind of got very angry about that in a weird way, which I don't think is particularly healthy.
Well, it's sort of an odd thing that as Xxxild keeps saying, the stigma on sex work. One of the things that was recently looked at on British television was talking about the sorts of people who actually frequent prostitutes. And there's this sort of impression that if you're a man who goes to prostitutes, you can't get sex elsewhere, you're disgusting, and what they found was most of the men who went to prostitutes were actually people who were perfectly capable of getting sex. However, it was a case that for them it was either easier or more honest to say, I want sex. I don't want to play games. I don't want to try and figure out who you are in a bar. I don't want to pick you up and have a one-night stand. Yeah. I'm choosing to have a sexual encounter. I want sex, so I'm going to have sex without feeling like I'm coercing some drunk, bint in a bar. And I think that shocks a lot of people, that most of the people who frequent prostitutes aren't desperate loners. They're are perfectly legitimate, normal human beings. And one of the things that I think is actually incredibly important about sex work, and was the discussion I was having last night with my friend Carl, before I came home was that when you talk about disabilities, sometimes a trained, and I know it sounds weird to say trained, but a sex worker who's familiar with people with certain sorts of physical disabilities or mental disabilities is the best person to be engaging in a sexual relationship with these people. And just because they either have a certain amount of mental sort of disability or physical disability doesn't mean that that strips them of the right to have a sex life. One of Carl's friends was discussing the fact that she had a gentleman under her care who, for his own safety, had to physically be hands-on restrained at all times. But written into his care instructions was the fact that he was a human being and he had a right to sexual release. Mm-hmm. So his carers had to keep their hands on him, hold him for his own safety while he masturbated. Because the fact was he had every right to have a sex life. Just because he could accidentally hurt himself or others didn't mean that that stripped him of the right. And I mean, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Dan Savage, but I'm a big fan of Savage Love. I enjoy reading his articles, and he's often had questions about, prostitutes and whether or not disabled family members have a right to be able to go to them. Are they considered therapists? There's been discussion on whether or not there are basically therapeutic sex workers that essentially are medical practitioners, essentially, who service people who happen to have physical and mental disabilities that aren't able to have a normal relationship but have every right to sex. It's part of your rights as a human being to be able to express yourself sexually, and sometimes that's the only appropriate option for you. And that's how I think sex work in general needs to be looked at. It's therapeutic to the people engaging in it, whether it's just convenience or physical safety issues. Sometimes the best person to deal with it is someone who is being paid to do what they're doing and understands the risks and the obstacles in dealing with someone, for instance, who has sort of spasmodic muscles and, can't possibly be accountable totally for their own muscle movements. And one of the stories I'm familiar with is a man who, in seeing a therapeutic sex worker, that's one of the very few things that after he had sex, his body was able to control his own limbs in a much more natural way for a period of time. So it was absolutely a therapeutic act.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I can see how that would be. And anytime you get into talking about sex work, you always get into okay, so we're going to legalize it or we're going to regulate it, and how would we as society do that? How would that go? How would we go about that? And I remember at Rain, this is why I really am glad that Rain is in here, because she's I am probably the least articulate person among anybody I know ever talks about sex work, right? But so I always need somebody who's more articulate than me. But we got into talking about regulation, and our opponents were saying, sex workers, they don't pay taxes and they're selfish. And by the way, some of the other accusations that get hurled at women who are saying, look, I was a sex worker and I'm for decriminalization. They're liars. They're living with what's called a false consciousness. They have this big psychologically empty hole inside them. I had a woman recently tell me that about myself, and I revealed
it's a we know better than you attitude.
Yeah, I revealed very little about myself. The two things I revealed about myself were that I used to be a sex worker, and that because I told therapists that I was a sex worker, I was misdiagnosed as a, it was crazy at the time, it was really insane, as a satanic ritual abuse survivor. That was the only two things I mentioned to her, and she felt like because she was a woman who was running rescue operation, that she knew what my life was about and what was going on with me. It was very uncomfortable. Now I forget what I was going to say. Oh, the regulation part. Ideally, what I would like to see is, what's called decriminalization. And I know Rain might disagree with me here, but that it would operate like massage therapists do, okay? And in this model, you can have sex workers who go ahead and get medical nursing degree or something, or credentialed. They get credentialed, and so these would be the people that would see people who are being actually referred by their doctors or their caregivers to a sex worker because they have the credentials to do that. Back in the day, I had a really disabled client. This is when I was a sex worker, and during the course of our encounter, his heart would be racing. I could feel his heart, and it was very scary because I had no idea that if something went wrong with him, what I would do. He had to educate me on what to do if anything happened to him medically, who to call, what to do. There was all kinds of equipment in his room. So we were just sort of operating in the dark there, but, like in an ideal situation, that wouldn't be a problem, So anyway.
I completely agree with you with regulating the industry to a degree where it would be seen as safe. I think if it was regulated and treated as a safe industry where people, were tested on a regular basis and had to maintain what I would call like a license, I think that the industry wouldn't be so shamed. I mean, we'll always have the prohibitionists from the right-wing end of things, but I think over time it could be seen as a legitimate industry, especially if it is not, I mean, there are certain models that I don't agree with that keep it, like a red light district model is not one that works very well for me because it's still seen as a shady area of work, and people are still shamed, and it's,
I know.
I don't know. I see it working out far more better, like the way you described it, as massage therapy, or even going in to see an esthetician, where it's a clean industry and people would feel safe going to that industry.
Right. If you get a massage from a person who you don't even know, okay? Well, let me say that again. If you receive a massage, which basically is you're receiving a healthy, you could be, receiving health benefits from it or pleasure from that, okay? You can get a massage from your friend. You can get a massage from a person who's trained and licensed in massage therapy. Either of those two things, right? And anything in between. And so that's how I think it should be looked at. And then the market, the customers can choose how they want to select from that range of options. You could go to somebody who's trained, or you can just go to someone who's not trained. None of it is stigmatized. None of it is criminalized.
Yeah, I don't think that anyone should be put in jail or even allowed to be left in danger. And I think that's part of what people who are prohibitionists, they seem to actually even enjoy the fact that women are harmed, men and women, sorry, I don't want to exclude men, but prostitution and sex workers are harmed, and they use that to push their prohibition, which doesn't solve anything.
Yeah.
It's... I'm trying to think of something to add here that would be useful. I think a bulb just went.
Yes.
It was interesting. So,
well, I mean, obviously, you and I have had a tiny chat about it, and you agree that sex work should be legalized.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, because, I mean, it removes the ability for people... Well, it doesn't remove the ability, but it reduces the risk of people using it for their kind of criminal gain. Yeah. And it reduces the abuse of people because You've got, you're not having to deal with pimps or anything like that. That's, well, probably would still, but I'm not very
one
eloquent
of the
here.
things I find sort of disturbing is the fact that sex workers obviously can encounter an exacerbated level of rape, obviously. But it's almost impossible to get any help if you're a sex worker reporting a rape. Because the fact is, if a nurse is assaulted by a client while she's, changing their nappy or doing whatever they need to do, that's a crime. But if you have a sex worker who's suddenly not okay with how things are proceeding, suddenly her right or his right to say no and have that still be considered rape if it continues is stripped. And that's one of my big problems with the illegality of prostitution, is the fact that no one takes it seriously. Because you already, and this segs nicely into slut shaming. It's the idea that obviously, well, you were already starting to have sex with that person, they were paying you, so how can it be rape? It's like, well, I'm sorry, I can be halfway into, starting a sexual act with my partner, and if I change my mind and say no, and he persists, or if he says no and I persist, that's still rape. Yeah. How is it any different just because money's changing hands?
Absolutely.
And that's the thing, is there's the whole attitude of she was asking for it. I'm sorry, I should be able to walk down the street completely naked, like waving a banner saying I love sex, but the second that someone grabs me and forces me to have sex, it's still rape. It doesn't matter what I'm wearing, not wearing, what I'm saying or not saying. If the word is no, that's still rape. And if the word is yes, that doesn't make me a slut. That makes me someone who has every right to choose who, when, how many, and all of that I sleep with. And that's one thing that really bothers me, is it's the idea that obviously if you wear a short skirt, you're saying yes by what you're wearing, not by your right as a human being to choose.
Mind you, that what you just said ties quite neatly into the extreme other end, which is the extreme feminists who will say that any form of penetrative sex, even if consensual, is rape.
Yeah, I'm really baffled by the idea that all penetrative sex whatsoever is considered rape. But that's the thing, I'm not familiar enough with the sort of crazy...
Because I think, would I be right in saying that Reignbow and Xxxild, have you both had dealings with the kind of the more extreme side of the kind of, I don't know if it's, what word
Oh, no experience with them at all. Right?
Sarcasm.
Who are they? Feminists? Telling me who I can and under what terms I can arrange for an encounter with someone, to have sex with someone. That would never happen, would it?
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about your encounters with that? Because I'm guessing from your sarcasm that there have been some encounters with that. Oh, you don't have to if you don't want to.
I was going to wait for Rain to start. But
I would consider radical feminists creationists of the feminist movement. They like to manipulate and recreate statistics to make it appear always that women are constant and persistent victims no matter what, and they'll ignore any statistic that disagrees or even makes men look like victims of sex crimes. They're quite something. They want full control over the idea of what is feminine and femininity and what makes a woman appropriately feminine or not, or part of the movement or not. It's all just control, and they'll often get into bed with the right wing, who also likes to control and shame a woman's sexuality.
I mean, the article I've got up on screen here, I've got one that was on the, and I know that I'm running the risk of bringing down a certain amount of wrath on my own head with this by drawing attention to it, but it's from the witchwind.wordpress.com site. And the title of the article was PIV, which is penis in vagina. PIV is always rape, okay? And it starts here. The first sentence is just to recall a basic fact. Intercourse / PIV is always rape, plain and simple. Plain and simple. It's just, and it goes on, and the article itself, it
basically just says that sex in any form is the instrument in which men oppress women, and even if we think we want it, by having sex, we're being raped by being oppressed. It's just some Nazi bullshit, really.
I actually read the article a way back, and no matter what angle I approached it from, it was garbage.
Yeah.
Complete and utter garbage. And I have to admit that the thought went through my head. Do any of them understand what rape is?
Oh, that thought's gone through my head numerous times during the course of our debates, I guess you could call them, and the ensuing drama all around it. Because people get very emotional about the idea that society will grant sex workers rights. They get, I mean, you'd be surprised. People who will be with progressive rights on every other issue will put their foot down, so to speak. How can we, or they'll be conflicted. I remember back when Zomgit, oh my God, it's Chris, made a video in support of sex workers' rights. There were people in her comment section who agreed on everything else, every other progressive issue that we had that comes up for debate. They were freaking out. They were saying, what about my daughter? What about my kids? And they were like, I need somebody who's done this work to tell me that, to explain to me how I can possibly get on board with granting sex workers' rights.
Mm-hmm.
It was shocking, and that was how I came into it, was somebody begging me to help her understand. It was very emotional. But it's all in between. It's not just the extreme radicals who find penis and vagina sex to be oppressive. It's other people in between those levels. In other words, it's people who essentially they just have a problem with it. They're just like, how can this be?
Yeah. It's a lot of people who buy into emotional arguments too. Like you'll hear from the radical feminists, they'll say things to people who are on the fence. Would you want your daughter to be involved in sex work or be a sex worker? Usually they use more vitriolic language than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But it is most of what they argue for and against. They use a lot of appeals to emotion and just they disregard that anyone who is in sex work is choosing to do that. That just doesn't exist for them.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, this article, this Witchwind article, I mean, one of the things that's just left out of me here, it's got the term "fuck you" is not an insult for nothing. Men know why. It's the worst thing you can do to a human being. It is in itself an extremely physically invasive act, very often painful. Generally at the beginning, before the pain may be cut off by the genital arousal. Causes all sorts of tears, bruises, swelling, discomfort, STDs, vaginal infections, urinary infections, genital warts, HIV, and death. And so the way it kind of goes through saying that it's almost like presenting it saying it always causes these things.
Yeah.
It's equating having sex with.
Well, one of the things I found interesting, just sort of stop for a second. Interesting is the next paragraph down says the fact intercourse causes so many infections and tears and warts attest to the unnaturalness of intercourse, that it's not meant to be. The vagina's primary function isn't to be penetrated by a penis, but to eject a baby for birth. There are two muscle tissues / sphincters pressed against each other to help the baby be pushed out. Penetration of the penis into the vagina is completely unnecessary for conception.
Yeah.
That's frightening. Wow. This article may have been written by a political lesbian, which there's a blurry line between radical feminism and political lesbianism.
Yeah.
I mean, she does put herself down as being radical femme. She she mentions being a rad femme a few times.
The thing that's interesting about this, I noticed that somebody else who's kind of jumped aboard this is somebody we've actually had on the show a long time ago. A guy called Francois Tremblay from Montreal, who was on talking about presuppositionalism, and he's kind of gone totally this direction as well. And I basically was echoing almost everything that this article was saying when I found
it very strange,
very odd. I couldn't quite understand where he was coming from. But I don't know. I want to say he's been on this show. Actually, I realised it's not this show. But fundamentally flawed.
Yes.
Back in the day, I keep forgetting that these are different things. But yeah, it's. I think it's the way, and it does really kind of reflect the same kind of thinking as people like the presuppositionalists who tell you what you're thinking and deny you the right to have your own thoughts. When you say, I don't believe in God, they say, oh, yes, you do. And like if Kat said, well, I enjoy sex, this person would say, no, you don't. You know, you're just denying the truth of your...
You've been
You're brainwashed
into
by the patriarchy.
Yeah.
It does say that children and women are groomed from a tiny age to accept sex.
Oh, fuck off.
Exactly, and I mean that's the thing is that to drag us slightly back into sex work, I considered sex work at one point in my life because I've always made a joke of the fact that my degree is in human sexuality and culture. Generally, I deal with intergendered people, gender tropes, and actual sort of sex. And it used to be one of my pickup lines, one of my chat-up lines, when people talk to me. I'd say that I had a degree in sex because, you know, you do what you love.
Yeah.
So, but no, it's one of those things that I've been friends with sex workers. I've known people who've been coerced into sex work. I know people who've been in sex work of their free will and will continue to be in sex work because it's something they enjoy. And, you know, everything from cam girls to phone sex operators. I did a tiny foray into sort of fantasy chat. And that I actually found quite disturbing because it wasn't an honest interaction. I probably would have found it more interesting if I was having sort of interesting chats with people who one-on-one, sort of I could actually talk to that person. But the way the system was set up was it was dozens of women replying to each message as the same made-up woman. And you literally just have the notes down one side.
Right.
And just reply.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't necessarily get the same person twice at any point. And there'd be little notes about who you were and what you told people. And there's kind of this impetus to imply that you're going to meet, knowing that you never will. And they say that the men are aware of the fact that they'll never meet and that it's for entertainment purposes only. But they're milking money out of people by trying to be like, oh, maybe next week we'll meet up. Maybe next week. And I don't think I saw the same chat window from the same person twice in like the weekend I did it.
Does anybody ever meet up, ever?
Oh, God, no, not on this site, no, because they're not real.
Well, that's good to know.
One thing I'd like to say, I very quickly, because I'm kind of keeping an eye on the comments at the same time, and there are a couple of comments that are quite relevant at this point. I think this is, I'm going to try and pronounce this username, but I think it's somebody else. Male Grisfelis, I think that's Jade.
That's Jade.
Yeah, she said that she was and is a political lesbian, and that when we're talking about the people who are going to say that PIV is rape, we're talking about the extremists. And she's absolutely right, we are talking about the extremists. And then Esther Anna said pretty much the same thing. She said, I dislike the constant talk of sex-negative feminists. They get too much airtime, and there are many more sex-positive feminists, which I think is also true. And I think it's important to... You know,
but again, I think, Esther, the issue that we've got is a bit like talking about sort of crazy fundies, is we understand that they're perfectly normal people who happen to be theists, like Fiona, for instance. She's absolutely a rational human being and cute as a button to boot, and she's not psychotic. I consider myself a feminist, which again is why I said that I found it really interesting, the idea that feminism says that you can support all of these different ideas about sort of empowering women and sort of equality and all of these things. But when people suddenly draw the line at saying you can't choose to monetize your own pleasure, it just seems really weird and shit, you know? I mean, I personally think you're not a particularly great feminist if you say that your body is yours to do with what you want, you have the right to an abortion, you have the right to not be discriminated against, but you can't monetize your own pleasure. I think that's kind of shit, you know? But that's just me.
I mean, the other thing that kind of has been coming up, and you know, I'm going to move us on slightly from this topic if everybody's okay for us.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, it's still within the same kind of sex thing. Was the concept of polyamory and the concept of having multiple partners, but within a consensual relationship. And I think as I've got older, I've kind of wondered, I found myself more and more wondering, why is that illegal? What's consenting adults do within their own house? Why should it be anybody else's business? So, you know, if Kat and I decided to have, you know, live with another couple, or 3 other women, or 4 other guys, or whatever.
I like that again.
How would that be? Firstly, why is that anybody else's business what we decide to do? I mean, and why would it be illegal? It would be illegal.
I mean, to be fair, but only if you were in a relationship. Now, if you're just sleeping around, that's fine.
Yeah.
Unless you're going by adultery laws. I mean, whose business is it if I choose to tuck Fiona away at the foot of our bed because there's not a whole lot of space in our house? I mean, it's fine.
Fiona, my wife's hitting on you tonight.
But is polyamory illegal?
Yes.
I mean, well, I mean, relationship-wise, but I know marriage might.
Well, I mean, bigamy is obviously.
Yeah.
Polyamory isn't, but I mean that's the thing.
Well, I mean, bigamy. I suppose it's when you've not told the other partner that.
No, I mean it's still bigamy regardless of if everyone knows what's going on or not.
Yeah.
I have no problem with bigamy or polygamy.
I don't either.
Funny you should bring this topic up because not more than a half hour before this show aired, a friend of mine that I recently told I was an atheist asked if I was if my previous marriage was monogamous, and I said that's a weird question to follow up the fact that I just told you I'm an atheist, and she goes, well. A lot of atheists I know are poly. And I was like, a lot?
I don't know about
like
it.
I think I interact with a lot of atheists through the YouTubes. And I don't know of anyone who is a card-carrying poly, or you know what I mean, or an out, or it just it doesn't come up in conversation. And if it did, it never has with the people that I know. So I thought that was a weird. I don't know if it's a stereotype? Like, is it a stereotype that like atheists are into polyamorous relationships?
I don't know that it's a stereotype that they're into polyamory. I think it's more a stereotype that we're all sex-crazed sodomites, you know, and that's why we don't believe, is because we want to revel in our feculent sin and, you know, bang everything on the planet from the bushes to the...
What does feculent mean?
Reveling in shit.
Yeah.
Oh, fecal. I got it.
Yes.
Which, as a little aside, if you want to hear a longer conversation about that, download my other podcast, Future Library, which is coming out tomorrow, with the rapper Dose One is interviewed. And there's a lengthy discussion about how would you bring up the topic of poo sex in a relationship.
Oh.
So that's just as a smoothie. But the cat just jumped into a guitar. That's interesting. Sorry. So I had a thought, and what was it? I distracted myself.
I think you get this accusation coming from certain quarters of the theists because it's their attempt to demonize you because they see it as a very bad thing. So therefore, it can be used to demonize what they call the atheist community. And they will do that in so many different ways. But I think that's where it comes from, Chris.
And I'm a little concerned that you actually did have me and Rain on to talk about this stuff, along with Kat. Kat, I didn't know you even were following the sex worker rights movement. But I've been reluctant to bring it up because I've had people screaming at me on videos while they watched. What I'm talking about, friends like from the religious side of the fence here have witnessed this. Someone literally in 4 videos screaming at me at the top of their lungs, calling me vulgar names and that sort of thing. I've had comments and that sort of stuff, and I can only imagine that this might be abhorrent to them and like some kind of evidence that this is an atheist thing. It's not. I've had a lot of criticism from atheists. I've had a lot of these same things. These are all atheist feminists. These are all atheist women and men who are against sex worker rights. So I just wanted to sort of say that. So this.
Yeah, it's very true. There's a lot of atheists that are against it, and they're more than willing to get into bed with the right-wing religious people in order to push the same argument. But there's a lot of atheists that are against decriminalization.
Yeah, I think basically, it comes down to me that as long as everything is consensual, and as long as you're not hurting anybody else, unless it's consensual and that's what you both deciding you want to do, then it's nobody's business what other people do in any respect.
Well, I just saw a comment by Ozzy addressing it, and he goes, "Mowdy, that's interesting. The poly and lifestyle couples I've known were all theists. In fact, Terry Gould's book on swinging shows that the swinging and polyamory is shows that swinging and polyamory is overrepresented among the religious." There's Ozzy dropping evidence.
Well, let's think about it. I mean, the biggest kind of TV show that was about poly relationships in the last few years was Big Love.
Which obviously is about Mormonism.
Yeah, about Mormonism.
Yeah.
Incidentally, just interesting, I was just looking up about bigamy on Wikipedia, and shockingly, you can be put in prison for it in countries like countries as advanced as Australia, Belgium, up to 10 years imprisonment in Australia, Belgium, between 5 to 10 years imprisonment. It's illegal in Canada.
What I do like is that Egypt, it is legal as long as the first wife consents.
Yeah.
Iceland, it's illegal.
Sounds right.
Yeah. All 27 countries of the European Union have it illegal. However, the UK does have a kind of clause for it, saying that marriages performed abroad may be recognised for some legal purposes. So.
So basically, it's the countries where it's legal. You end up in a position where they can't really deny the legality of your marriage when you're actually legally married in your own country to multiple partners. I know that for immigration purposes, there's a certain sort of notation that you end up having to, and this may have changed, so please correct me if someone has a link in the group who's listening. When I was looking at it, studying for various things, it was a case where you basically had to pick a primary wife, and that was the one that the UK would primarily recognize, but it didn't invalidate your marriages, so that was kind of interesting. But I mean, there's a lot of
friction, wasn't it? You picked one wife.
Problematic for the state.
I like this one best. Yeah, but I mean,
I know what to do with polyamorous relationships when it comes to marrying them.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
What do we do?
Not how marriage. I mean, I suppose it's because people see it as sacred or untouchable marriage, which is where you get into the whole homosexuality in marriage and all of that. But I mean, you get a lot of multiple partnering, and the fact is that does come down to a certain amount to our evolution. I mean, the fact is that most species aren't monogamous, and that even humans really aren't great at monogamy. We tend to be serial monogamous.
Right.
but we're certainly not the sort that believes that the first person you end up with is the only person you ever desire. You're not a penguin that gets given a stone and that's it for life. It's, you know, I'm a penguin that gets given a stone and then, you know, for my 35th birthday asks for an orgy, you know.
She has asked for an orgy for her 35th birthday.
Well, penguin females, right? Penguin females, they accept stones from males to have sex, right? To breed.
Yeah. I mean,
it's payment. I would like to clarify something. I remember the thought I was having before. When we're talking about polyamory, we need to distinguish between people who are actually polyamorous and those who just want to sleep around a lot and are hipsters and want to describe themselves as polyamorous.
Yeah.
I think there is a difference there,
Yeah.
and I think it's perfectly healthy to have a sex life where you want to sleep with a different person every night. Not a problem. But I think, you know, there is a difference between that and.
Well, I think that's one of the things that doesn't help is that it's hard to see it as a normal relationship when it's sort of clouding the water with all these people that's like, yeah, I'm totally in a polyamorous relationship. It's great.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
When in fact it is it's one person bullying the other and letting the other one sleep around.
Yeah.
One of the best ideas I've heard, or one of the best sort of phrases I've heard, I picked up from Dan Savage's articles, was the concept of being monogamish, which is basically you're mostly monogamous, but there's some room for wiggle at the sides, you know? And I think there's a lot of people who would describe themselves as being monogamish, you know, mostly monogamous. And the fact is, I mean, the prevalence of adultery and infidelity illustrates to an extent that it's fairly hard for humans to you know, keep it in their pants.
Yeah, and so the fringes that you're talking about of monogamy that makes it monogamish, they're called conferences. If what I observed is any evidence of it. People treat conferences like they're Las Vegas. Like, what happens in this place stays in this place. So many drunk, older, married men hitting on drunk, younger postdocs. It was just like entertaining, but like embarrassing as a man. Like, dude, you're just, come on. You're wearing a wedding ring and you're doing that, obviously, in front of all of your colleagues. Come on. Night after night, multiple people is fantastic to watch.
Not in the same room, though.
I
mean, in the same bar. I didn't watch them have sex after.
One big room, right?
But no, all I can
That's
think
what
of
the
now
conference
is how that's gonna get quote mine after night watching all these people in the room.
Yeah,
great.
And I mean, the thing is, the thing is that the religious right will say, well, you know, if you legalize gay marriage, what comes next? And then they always going to go, oh, will bestiality be fine then, or will you know, sex with children be fine? They always seem to miss that the consent part is the important thing, and I think that's been the repeated message all the way through this evening's show. Has been that consent and informed consent is the important part.
Yeah.
You know, I think if you're not able to make informed consent, then it's probably not a good idea. But then I'm kind of conscious that I shouldn't be saying anybody should be doing this or that. I'm always kind of conscious of that, and then I feel bad when I say you shouldn't be doing this, and then I think, oh no, you know.
But I think normal human beings would agree that anything that can't consent and have informed consent probably shouldn't be fucked with, literally or figuratively.
Well, I need to let you know that informed consent is one of my responsibilities at work is to submit protocols and consent forms to our institutional review board, whose job it is specifically is to ensure the safety of people who participate in research. So informed consent's not as simple as it sounds. Informed consent is actually a very sticky situation because of the I think the components that Rain brought up earlier, and that has to do with coercion as compared to incentive, right? You can incentivize a study such that people want to volunteer, and you can do that with money. But if the money is too much, or if you're offering that too much money to a subset of the population that is specifically lower SES people, socioeconomical status people, that's kind of considered coercion. If you intimidate people into doing something, that's considered coercion, right? Incentive is like this really light version of, hey, hey, this is what I'm doing, and if you want to do it, I'll give you a sticker. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. But it muddies the ground when you apply it from research to sex, in my opinion, because when is the exchange of money an incentive versus coercion? And can it be coercion such that somebody was reluctant to do it to begin with, but the person who was offering could give them a lot of money for it? Are they all of a sudden a sex worker? Or is that coercion? Or is that a breach of something?
But you can say that about almost any job. There's a lot of jobs out there that are physically tasking and even dangerous where there's a high enough pay that it's worth the risk that people are willing to take to get that money.
But sex is different.
Why?
It is different.
Exactly.
Sex is different.
Why?
I would agree, but I don't think it's that different to the point where you have to go to such extremes.
Oh, I've got an example here.
I'm interested in hearing from Chris why he thinks sex is different, because Chris is very quiet tonight.
Yeah, he's very quiet.
Come on, Mouty.
As a researcher,
ask up. Oh, I know.
I don't know much about sex work, so I was letting the the interesting conversation go. No, I'll answer your question. I'm not getting out of it. I got it. Yeah. So sex is different because it is a physiological response, like orgasms, arousal, the ability to play with tension and release that good sex should be about, right, is different, and it works on many different levels, right? Not only physiologically, the amount of hormones that are poured into your body when you're enjoying it, or for the person that wants to enjoy it, if there's a person who doesn't want to enjoy it, that makes a weird balance, right? But sex is different from like the example that I think Rain gave, because it is a physiological response that is meant for procreation that we use for pleasure, and that makes it different to me. My personal opinion.
From one of the things that Xxxild I've seen is using the phrase bodywork in the past to describe it. It got me thinking about working on an oil rig. You decide to take the risk. You're doing physical work, so you're using your body to work. You're not having sex with anybody, but you're putting yourself in a situation where you are consenting to a very high-risk environment for money. And that there's a point is, how is that different? It's,
And how often is the sex worker themselves actually enjoying the act that they're performing sexually? Usually their goal is to please the client, and I don't think it's reasonable to think that every client that sex worker is with is actually enjoying it sexually.
Yeah. I've had arguments with people who try to convince me that there's something different about the sex that I had with my clients versus the sex they have with their significant other, and I can talk about that all day and hold my ground, because even though you might enjoy the sex with your significant other, okay, you don't. I want to challenge you. Do you enjoy it every single time to the same degree?
No, absolutely not. I don't think anyone does.
Do you ever consent to sex with your partner because you enjoy giving another person's pleasure, because that's satisfying too? I know I do.
I do too.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Sometimes it has nothing to do with me at all. It's just it's just I get a real rush out of seeing somebody else enjoying what I'm doing to them. So.
I mean, I think that's true of most partners, because obviously a lot of us participate in one-sided sexual acts. I mean, anyone who hasn't ever, gone down on their partner and have that be the only act you're participating in at that moment. I mean, you can get off on, giving head or whatever, but the actual nervous pleasure is centered on your partner.
Right.
And sometimes that's something you do because it sort of thrills you to thrill them, and sometimes it's something. It's just sex is weird, but there's nothing wrong with it, you know.
No.
But it is sex, and that's why when people compare it to other types of work, I try to understand that yes, that comparison to other work works sometimes, but within the exchange of exchanges going on between two people who are having sex, it's a little bit different because you can also encounter people who get off on sort of abusing other people, and that's what turns them on. So those are the types of things we have to be aware of in all of these different types of exchanges. And people who like to exploit people sexually are out there, and they're, you know, this enters into the whole discussion, and a lot of times it's the only part of it that people can focus on. But you know.
But the fact is, people who want to take advantage of other people or who get off on other people's misery are common in all workplaces. They're called managers or, you know, MPs, politicians, you know.
Yeah.
They're my liver doctor who burned his initials into someone's liver because he's an egomaniac. People are fucked up.
Yeah.
And that's not only going to be within the realm of, you know, clients or prostitutes or sex workers or strippers or, you know, management.
Can I dip back into the monogamy and polyamory subject for a moment?
Dip away, my darling.
I have a question that I'd like to ask the whole panel, and I'm wondering if this is true. Have you guys heard of the 7-year relationship point where it seems that lots of people end up looking for new relationships after that?
7-year itch.
Yeah, 7-year itch.
Is there any validity to that?
I know what this is about.
No
I know where
idea.
this comes from. I can tell you why it's called the 7-year itch, and it was something to do with it is the whole. Well, like Wikipedia says, it's a psychological term that suggests that happiness in a relationship declines after around 7 years of marriage. The phrase originates as a name for irritating and contagious skin complaints of a long duration. Examples of reference may have included STD herpes outbreaks that are known as to significantly decrease in frequency after 7 years, or mites that live under the skin. So a lot of it seemed to be that the original name of it came from people getting skin rashes from shagging. So you know, in cultures where it was frowned upon to do anything before you were married, if one of you had contagious mites already, then when you slept with your new partner on your wedding night and you gave them, then you gave them the same thing, and they then got the itch that just went on for ages. And you know, they didn't have miracles like hydrocortisone back then.
Which can read it for a living.
Yeah, you know, all those things that we have that we just go, I've got an itch, I'm just going to get a cream that will now switch off various parts of my body to stop me from being irritated by this.
Okay. So there's no statistical link, perhaps, with people ending a relationship?
Probably is to an extent, but I think it's just the idea that familiarity breeds contempt sometimes. And by that point in a relationship, I don't think it's straight up 7 years, but by that point in a relationship, usually the endearing parts of the things that used to be sort of quirks in the person, that you're like, oh, I love them for what people would see as their flaws, you often stop loving around that point. You start to find it annoying again.
In college, I knew a couple who were doing some research that seemed to bear out that women are the ones who start looking for another partner to bear children with, to have children with, right? After a certain amount of time. And that somehow followed, it made some sort of sense biologically for them. And I'm not sure if there's any studies out there that are that have proven this out or not.
Genetic diversity.
Pardon?
I said it kind of makes sense from a genetic diversity point if you look at it from an evolutionary advantage.
Yeah, what are the odds that your offspring will survive if you have multiple different fathers over a period of time? Because if one is genetically inferior, has weird ears or something, or keels over dead, all the kids from yes, Fiona, all the children are likely to possibly carry that defect. And you're not going to succeed biologically. You're not going to win the game of life.
Mm-hmm.
It would also improve the gene pool for the general community when those children become breeding age.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, apparently, according again to Wikipedia on the page about the 7-year itch, there's it can be analysed quantitatively. Divorce rates show a trend in couples that, on average, divorce around 7 years. Statistics shows that there is a low risk of separation during the first months of marriage, and after the honeymoon month, divorce rates start to increase. Most married couples experience a gradual decline in the quality of their marriage. In recent years, around the 4th year of marriage, around the 7th year, tensions rise to a point that couples either divorce or adapt to their partner. In samples taken from the National Centre for Health Statistics, there proves to be an average median duration of marriage across time. In 1922, the median duration of marriage was 6.6 years. 1974, it was 7.5 years, and in 1990, it was 7.2. So they can fluctuate from year to year, but the average stays relatively close to 7 years. So there does seem to be some maybe there's something hardwired into us that, through evolution, has been said, that
that's what I was getting at. Thank you very much for finding that, Alex.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think it may well be that. Talking of time, we're coming up on an hour and a half. Probably best to start drawing the show to a close. Before we do that, though, is there anything that we haven't touched upon that anybody wanted to mention? Everybody thinks for a moment.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I would like to say something about. I'd like to mention something about the people who are actually dead against rights for sex workers, with regard to safety. Because I can't get my head around why they would argue against this sort of thing if it improved the safety of other human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of these things. It's very much like the people who say that gay marriage will reduce the sanctity of their own marriage when it doesn't actually affect their marriage. It's like making sex workers safe doesn't impact at all on these people who seem to be against it.
Well, I just wanted to say something. I just wanted to say that it's amazing to me how the lengths to which people will go, people and groups will go in order to deny sex workers their voice and their rights, even still to this day. And we're talking, and I'm going to say this again because I know Jade brought it up, that, look, I'm a feminist, and feminist gets a lot of flack when it comes to this subject. But I've witnessed this, that feminist organizations, academic feminists, and their supporters have gone out of their way to deny sex workers their rights. That's why I rejected the identity of feminist. And I did this publicly, and I caused a lot of trouble when I did this. But I did it for a reason, because I think that, you might be for every other woman's right there is to be for. But when you make the subject of sex worker rights about women, okay, and want to demonize their clientele, and will go to extreme lengths to prevent them from being heard, like a political voice, and all kinds of other research-oriented stunts and dishonesty to political tactics that they've used against this marginalized and very small group. It's very hard to organize them anyway. That I have to reject you because you are not including me within your group of women, as a sex worker or as a former sex worker.
I think it boils down to control of women's bodies, and more importantly, I think it boils down to control of gender ideologies. And it's people who want to keep the standard gendered ideas that women are supposed to be this and men are supposed to be that, and they want to keep things that way.
And it's amazing to me that feminists participate in this too. And so if you are identifying as a feminist, know that I support women's rights, but my rejection of feminists and my sympathies that I've had toward looking at some of these studies that they're putting out, that people call to my attention, I'm not with that. There's a reason I'm this way, and there's a reason I feel this way. And it's not that I'm not for women's rights, or I used to be a feminist. I used to unashamedly call myself a feminist. I can no longer do that because I have been so heavily involved in learning about this issue, and that's why I am who I am at this point, because of what I've learned.
I did want to, at this point, bring up sort of a topic to start bringing us into the post show, as we are running at about the hour-and-a-half mark. One of the things I studied, and one of the things I wrote about a lot during my university career, was the idea of deviation, or deviance, I should say. It's the idea, it runs into the whole thing with Kinsey. The idea of, and segs in sort of nicely with religion as well, the idea that what we do with our bodies, everyone seems to think that what they're doing is taboo, and that no one else participates in these acts or the way that they do something, when in fact Kinsey's research found that 90% of what people did was pretty bloody common. And it's sort of the idea that everyone seems to think that what they do is sort of odd. So I just thought it'd be interesting to throw out there for the post show a discussion of what is sexually normative, what sort of acts are considered sort of weird that are in fact are perfectly normal. It's the way that we've treated homosexuality as being a sort of something deviant for a very long time, when in fact, not only in our own species, but in other species, we can see that homosexuality isn't uncommon, and that even in the rest of the animal kingdom, the percentages of people who are homosexual bear out through the animal kingdom. Roughly the same percentage crop up in most species.
Lots and lots of species.
So it's sort of just an interesting jumping off point into talking about what's weird, because one joke I heard, which I stand by, is the idea of the difference between sexing, the idea between kinky and sick. Kinky is using feathers during sex. Sick is using the whole damn chicken.
Oh.
So it might be interesting to just sort of flow into a discussion there on what it is that we think is normal,
I'm just going to pull this cat off the server.
Alex is trying to disengage a cat from the server, which he thinks is normal and not kinky.
This cat decides that he wants to climb into where all the big hard drives are. I should actually bring our friend,
our
Mr. Cliff Jumper, who is the host of the post show, and he hosts it very well. We should bring him in so he can tell us all about what he has lined up. This cat is determined to get into that stuff. So I'm just sending him the link, so hopefully he'll be able to join us. No, that's not the right button. There we go. So hopefully Mr. Cliff Jumper will be joining us. If you can hear that banging in the background, I'm going to turn the camera around because I want to show everybody what that noise is. You see that cat? He's obsessed. He's obsessed with this. I'm going to grab focus for a moment. He's obsessed with this hanging thing from the blind. There. So it comes down.
Oh yeah.
And he's just bashing away at it, and I've tried to stop him.
To be fair, it does sound a bit like sex when you're talking about that. He's bashing away, and I've tried to stop him.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, hi Cliff.
Mr. Jumper.
Hi there.
Hello.
So tell me, Don Miguel, tell me of El Diablo. No, I mean, what are your thoughts on sex work, Cliff?
I don't know, really. I've not really considered it that much, to be honest. I think it all does come down to consent, though. I think consent is the big one. You know, if someone isn't going to consent, then you know, it's not on.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think what we'll do then is we'll close out on a joke. But before we do that, Cliff, where will people go to find the post show?
They'll be on my channel, which is CliffJumper24. And I shall not only start it in a few minutes, but I will put the link underneath here.
Okay, and I will put CliffJumper24 into the comments so that people can find the... have you ever jumped off a cliff, Cliff Jumper?
Wasn't a very big cliff. It was a sandy dune. It was a sandy dune.
It was a sand. Was it a sand dune?
I couldn't help but smile when I heard polyamory, and I was thinking, hang on, isn't that a CBeebies program? But no, that's polyamory.
See, but the thing is, oddly enough, polyamory is often sort of seen as being sort of this big giggle of a guy with a gaggle of women.
Oh my!
But the thing that's interesting is how often polyandry is seen as being sort of oddly subversive. Because you know what, I'm perfectly happy to have a big puppy pile.
I couldn't help but smile when I heard polyamory. I have an echo.
Did a video start playing at your house, Xxxild?
Yeah, I'm really sorry about that. Because I wanted to chime in there. You said polyandry, right?
Yep.
And what did you say after that?
It's the idea that people seem to, even people who seem to swallow polyamory as being all right, tend to think of it as being a man with multiple women.
Mm-hmm.
But they tend to frown upon the idea of a woman being greedy enough to have multiple men. And I think that's, again, part of the flows back into the whole sex work thing, is the idea, you know, how dare a woman, because obviously women don't enjoy sex, and if you do, you're obviously a sinful creature that, you know, should be roasting in hell. All I have to say on that one is, while I'm roasting in hell, I'll be surrounded by men in tiny, tiny trousers, fanning me and bringing me drinks, so fuck them.
But those trousers will be on fire. Be aware of that.
They've got hot asses.
I'm going to close out on a joke then. Mark, our friend, has posted in the comments, why did the pervert cross the road? Because his dick was in the chicken. And there's a serious note there. There's no consent from the chicken.
Oh,
so that's why we can safely call him a pervert. And I'd say a rapist. A chicken rapist. Yeah.
It's more funny that way that there was no
play.
The chicken is a what's a good name? I can't think of names for chickens. It's too late. I'm too tired.
Well, to be fair, I think we were fine with it was foul play.
Yeah, foul play is pretty good. That's a good one. Right, so everybody, there'll be invites going out for the post show. Cliff Jumper in his Star Trek. I'm going to give him focus for a moment. Look at in his Star Trek style boudoir there. He's got his
green screen.
He's got his
love lighting.
He's got his warp core there going to the left on our screen to his right.
That sounds like a penis joke.
Yeah, it is. That's his warp core. That's what he calls it with the ladies. Hey, ladies, want to come home and see my warp core?
So how's it name for that? To the left.
Yeah, Kushika Wawa, make it so.
Make sure that if you guys go into another hangout that you discuss this specific thing. I can't believe it didn't come up the whole time. Ozzy's nature porn.
Ozzy's nature porn. Well, you're invited into the hangout.
All right.
So
sure that subject comes up.
Everybody should come up.
I don't get in there.
Ozzy. Well, let me quickly mention this before we go on. Ozzy made a video where he's using a bow to light a fire.
Yeah.
So he's holding the stick and he's got the bow and he's going like that. But if you close your eyes, all you can hear is this, and you can hear Ilana in the background going, "Do it faster, do it faster." Oh yeah, that's good. That's looking good. Oh yeah, yeah. And he's going, "Yeah, I think it's catching now. It's getting quite hot." And then she's like, "Blow on it some more." And he's like, "Yeah."
He was blowing on it. It was beautiful.
You guys are horrible. Horrible human beings.
Did you see it, Chris? Come on, you got to go see that.
Given the
We're
topic,
gonna watch it right away.
Okay, good.
It is great. So on that bombshell, then, we shall draw the show to a close. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on to our guests, Rainbow and Xxxild.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thanks for getting everything to work eventually. We actually made it. We got there in the end, which we always do. Next time, 2 weeks' time, we don't actually have a topic lined up yet.
Not yet.
We'll come up with something good.
Out.
We've covered some biggies.
We could always go on to gender as well as because we've now dealt with sex.
Yeah, we'll...
And I'm sure that there are plenty of people who would have some input on gender issues. So.
I'm sure there would. Well, that's a possibility, but you know, we're always open to offers for ideas as well. You can write to the aristocratspodcast@gmail.com if you want to tell us that we're good, bad, or indifferent, and you can give us ideas. And I think Mark should say something again with his amazing mic.
Oh, what? Sorry.
That's fantastic. That's what we needed. Mark with his great mic, and it's a.
I would love to have taken part, but you're just talking about something I've got no experience of, so I will.
Sex?
What's sex?
Well, sex workers and that time in Amsterdam, but that's another matter.
And we should point out that the reason Peter isn't with us tonight is because he had, as he described it, a sudden infestation of family members.
Well.
Yeah, they suddenly all appeared apparently. But he should be back. And also, the title sequence, hopefully from next week, will have Cliff Jumper in it. And
you're gonna put Cliff in.
We're gonna put Cliff in. He's gonna get a little man. I think he's gonna share the screen with Cy 10, our musical director. Yeah, he's becoming.
So you have to get a picture for him.
Yeah, I'll have to get a picture. So I'll need a photograph for that. And Kat did want me to actually change the title sequence for this week, because I didn't have time to do it.
I want everyone naked.
She wanted kind of us photoshopped onto like classical nudes.
What do you think I am, Jason Burns?
Get him out. Get the tits out. Come on, Mouty. Come on.
This isn't the Awesome Crew show. We're not having any of that. No. This is a serious show.
I'll get down on my knees
with serious
beg.
people.
Come on.
So anyway, drawing things to a close. Thank you ever so much for watching.
I'm begging.
Christopher.
That's for the post show. He's doing a cut it there. So anyway, on that bombshell, we're going to go off air, and we'll see you viewers in a couple of weeks, and we'll all be able to talk behind your back in a moment.